Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Ashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhakti Bhagavati Naistike. So continuing with the discussion on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by Srila Das Goswami, Volume 3, Only He Could Lead Them, San Francisco, India, 1967. Chapter 22nd, Swami Invites the Hippies. So here in San Francisco, Prabhupada was giving initiation just after 2 weeks of meeting with the devotees. And he said he was taking big risk, but what to do? That was the only way. So, yet while living amongst these malechas, he required a certain standard of behavior. And he was adamant about preserving the purity of his Krishna consciousness society. For example, if he were going to distribute free food to the public, it could not be ordinary food, but must be prasadam, food offered to Krishna. Feeding hungry people was futile unless they were given prasadam and the chance of liberation from birth and death. And although in the kirtans he allowed openness and free expression and welcomed the wildest participation, the transcendental sound of the holy name had to dominate. He never allowed the kirtan to degenerate into mere beating on drums or chanting of any old words, nor could anyone in the group become so crazy that others wouldn't be able to hear or take part in congregation chanting. So yeah, that's what happens when you have so many people joining the kirtan, but everybody has his own idea. So Prabhupada had to at least put down some standards, and this is what we are going to follow. In his attempts to somehow or other get these young people chanting Hare Krishna, Prabhupada instinctively knew what to allow and what not to allow. He was a master, and his new disciples followed him when he permitted an egoistic, sensual dancer to jump around the temple or a drugged madman to argue with him in a question and answer period. When a person was too disruptive, Prabhupada was not afraid to stop him, but stopping was rare. The main thing was giving. The kirtan lasted more than an hour as the chanters joined hands and danced around the room and incense poured out the front door. The morning and evening kirtans had already made the Radha Krishna temple popular in Haight-Ashbury. But when the devotees began serving a daily free lunch, the temple became an integral part of the community. Prabhupada told his disciples simply to cook and distribute prasadam. That would be their only activity during the day. In the morning they would cook, and at noon they would feed everyone who came, sometimes 150 to 200 hippies from the streets of Haight-Ashbury. Before the morning kirtan, the girls would put oatmeal on the stove, and by breakfast there would be a room full of hippies, most of whom had been up all night. The cereal and fruit was for some the first solid food in days, because they would just live on drugs, that's it, not eating anything. But the main program was the lunch. Malti would go out and shop, getting donations whenever possible for whole wheat flour, garbanzo flour, split peas, rice, and whatever vegetables were cheap or free. Potatoes, carrots, turnips, rutabagas, beets. Then every day the cooks could prepare spiced mashed potatoes, buttered chapatis, split pea dal, and a vegetable dish for 200 people every day. The lunch program was possible because many merchants were willing to donate to the recognized cause of feeding hippies. Harsharani. The lunch program attracted a lot of the hippie crowd who obviously wanted food. They were really hungry, and there were other people who would also come. People who were working with the temple but were not initiated. The record player would be playing the Swamiji's record. It was a nice family atmosphere. Haridas. It was taken outside too, outside the front. But the main food was served inside. It was amazing. The people would just all huddle together and we would really line them wall to wall. A lot of them would simply eat and leave. Other stores along High Ashbury were selling everything from beads to rock records, but our store was different because we were not selling anything, we were giving it away. And we were welcoming everybody. We were providing a kind of refuge from the tumult and madness of the scene. So it was, in that sense, a hospital. And I think a lot of people were helped and maybe even saved. I don't mean only their souls, I mean their minds and bodies were saved because of what was going on in the streets that they just simply couldn't handle. I'm talking about overdose of drugs, people who were plain lost and needed comforting and who sort of wandered or staggered into the temple. Some of them stayed and became devotees, and some just took prasadam and left. Daily we had unusual incidents, and Swamiji witnessed it and took part in it. The lunch program was his idea. Mukunda. The Salvation Army. The Salvation Army came in one day for lunch. They just unloaded a whole truckload of people on us, about 30 or 40. So Salvation Army is like a sorry. They take donations in the form of clothes and shoes and other things, and they sell it at a cheaper rate. So, but here they were bringing people just to come and have lunch over there. Larry Shippen, some of the community of loose people cynically took advantage of the free food. They didn't appreciate the Swami, but because they said he was, in his own way, an orthodox minister, and they were much more interested in being unorthodox. It was a fairly cynical thing. Those who were more interested and had questions, the spiritual seekers, would visit Swamiji in his room. Many of them would come in complete anxiety over the war in Vietnam or whatever was going on. Trouble with the law, bad experience on drugs, a falling out with school or family. In fact, this free lunch program by ISKCON, the previous, the founder of Apple company, Steve Jobs, he said in one of his speeches that when he was going to college, he didn't have money. He didn't have money for the food. He would walk 7 miles to get this free food at Hare Krishna Center. I don't know if it was this same High Ashbury or some other place. But he would walk every day 7 miles to get free food. Those who were more interested, okay, there was much public concern about the huge influx of youth into San Francisco, situation that was creating an almost uncontrollable social problem. Police and social welfare workers were worried about health problems and poor living conditions, especially in High Ashbury. Some middle-class people feared a complete hippie takeover. The local authorities welcomed the service offered by Swami Bhaktivedanta's temple, and when civic leaders in High Ashbury talked of forming a council to deal with the crisis, they requested Swami Bhaktivedanta to take part. He agreed but lost interest after the first meeting. No one seemed seriously interested in hearing his solution. So what was his solution? Master Subramania, a lot of responsible citizens in San Francisco, were very happy that Swami Bhaktivedanta was working amongst the young people. The young people at the time were searching and needed somebody of a very high caliber who would take an interest in them and who would say, you should do this and you should not do that. The consensus was that no one could tell the young people what to do because they were completely out of hand with drugs and so forth. But Swamiji told them what to do and they did it. And everyone was appreciative, especially the young people. Harsharani, just from a medical standpoint, doctors didn't know what to do with people on LSD. Police and the free clinics in the area couldn't handle the overload of people taking LSD. The police saw Swamiji as a certain refuge. Michael Bowen. Bhaktivedanta had an amazing ability through devotion to get people off drugs, especially speed, heroin, burnt out, LSD, and got kicked out. See, so was purity of Prabhupada that even the government was appreciated. Haridas. The police used to come with the paddy wagons through the park in the early hours of the morning and pick up runaway teenagers sleeping in the park. The police would round them up and try to send them back home. The hippies needed all the help they could get, and they knew it. And the Radha Krishna temple was certainly a kind of spiritual haven. Kids sensed it. They were running, living on the streets, no place where they could go, where they could rest, where people weren't going to hurt them. A lot of kids would literally fall into the temple. I think it saved a lot of lives. There might have been a lot more casualties if it hadn't been for Hare Krishna. It was like opening a temple in a battlefield. It was the hardest place to do it, but it was the place where it was most needed. Although the Swami had no precedent for dealing with any of this, he applied the chanting with miraculous results. The chanting was wonderful. It worked. See, these hippies, because after taking drugs, they didn't know what they were doing. Sleeping, and they would sleep for a long time. And San Francisco or California, it is very nice weather throughout the year. It doesn't get very cold. So the kids just sleep in the parks. Well, what kind of life is that? And they didn't know what was going on in their lives, in their minds. Srila Prabhupada knew that only Krishna consciousness could help. Others had their remedies, but Prabhupada considered them mere patchwork. He knew that ignorantly identifying the self with the body was a real cause of suffering. How could someone help himself, what to speak of others, if he didn't know what to do, who he was, if he didn't know that the body was only a covering of the real self? The spirit soul, which could be happy only in its original nature as an eternal servant of Krishna. Understanding that Lord Krishna considered anyone who approached him a virtuous person, and that even a little devotional service would never be lost and could save a person at the time of death. Srila Prabhupada had opened his door to everyone, even the most abject runaway. But for a lost soul to fully receive the balm of Krishna consciousness, it would first have to stay a while and chant, inquire, listen, follow. See how Prabhupada was dealing, coming from Vrindavan at the age of 71 and dealing with hippies in America, first in New York, then in San Francisco. Only an empowered acharya can do this, what he did. Nobody else can do it. As Allen Ginsberg had advised, 5,000 hippies at the Avalon, the early morning kirtan at the temple provided a vital community service for those who were coming down from LSD and wanted to stabilize their consciousness on re-entry. Allen himself sometimes dropped by in the morning with acquaintances with whom he had stayed up all night. Allen Ginsberg. At 6:30 in the morning, we went over to Swami Bhaktivedanta's space station for some chanting and a little Krishna consciousness. There were about 30 or 40 people there, all chanting Hare Krishna to this new tune they have made up, just for mornings. One kid got a little freaked out by the scene at first, but then he relaxed. And afterwards, he told me, at first I thought, what's this? But then suddenly I realized I was just not grooving with where I was. I wasn't being where I was. Just their language. On occasion, the re-entries. Now, what is a re-entry? When they take LSD, the mind really hallucinates. They start thinking plenty of things. So they would think, I'm high. So from that high, he has to come down once the drugs effects are over. So coming down from that high, coming to the normal plane, they would call it re-entry. So he had gone out, now he's coming back. Actually gone nowhere. He is there, but in his mind, his thinking is gone out, and the re-entry. So on occasion, the re-entries would come flying in out of control for crash landings in the middle of the night. One morning at 2 a.m., the boys sleeping in the storefront were awakened by a pounding on the door, screaming, and police lights. When they opened the door, a young hippie with wild red hair and beard plunged in, crying, "Oh, Krishna, Krishna, oh, help me. Oh, don't let them get me. Oh, for God's sake, help." A policeman stuck his head in the door and smiled. "We decided to bring him by here," he said, "because we thought maybe you guys could help him." "I'm not comfortable in this body," the boy screamed as the policeman shut the door. The boy began chanting furiously and turned white, sweating profusely in terror. Swamiji's boys spent the rest of the early morning consoling him and chanting with him until the Swami came down for kirtan and class. The devotees often sent distressed young people to Swamiji with their problems, and they allowed almost anyone to see Swamiji and take up his valuable time. While walking around San Francisco, Ravindra Swarup once met a man who claimed to have seen people from Mars in his tent when he had been stationed in Vietnam. The man, who had just been discharged from an army hospital, said that the Martians had talked to him. Ravindra Swarup told him about Swamiji's book, Easy Journey to Other Planets, which verified the idea of life on other planets, and he suggested that the Swami could probably tell him more about the people from Mars. So the man visited the Swami up in his apartment. "Yes," Swamiji answered, "there are Martians." Gradually, Prabhupada's followers became more considerate of their spiritual master and began protecting him from persons they thought might be undesirable. One such undesirable was Rabbit, perhaps the dirtiest hippie in High Kashmir. Rabbit's hair was always disheveled, dirty, and even filled with mites. His clothes were ragged and filthy, and his dirt-caked body stank. He wanted to meet Prabhupada, but the devotees refused, not wanting to defile Prabhupada's room with Rabbit's nasty, stinking presence. One night after the lecture, however, Rabbit waited outside the temple door. As Prabhupada approached, Rabbit asked, "May I come up and see you?" Prabhupada agreed. Wow. As for challenges, almost every night someone would come to argue with Prabhupada. One man came regularly with prepared arguments from a philosophy book from which he would read aloud. Prabhupada would defeat him, and the man would go home, prepare another argument, and come back again with his book. One night, after the man had presented his challenge, Prabhupada simply looked at him without bothering to reply. Prabhupada's neglect was another defeat for the man, who got up and left. There's so many different hippies and different kinds of people Prabhupada was meeting. Israel, like Rabbit, was another well-known High Kashmiri character. He had a long ponytail and often played the trumpet during kirtan. After one of Prabhupada's evening lectures, Israel challenged, "This chanting may be nice, but what will it do for the world? What will it do for humanity?" Prabhupada replied, "Are you not in the world? If you like it, why will others not like it? So you chant loudly." A mustached man standing at the back of the room asked, "Are you Allen Ginsberg's guru?" Many of the devotees knew that the question was loaded and that to answer either yes or no would be difficult. Srila Prabhupada replied, I'm nobody's guru, I'm everybody's servant. To the devotees, the whole exchange became transcendental due to Swamiji's reply. Swamiji had not simply given a clever response, he had answered out of a deep, natural humility. One morning, a couple attended the lecture, a woman carrying a child, a man wearing a backpack. During the question and answer period, the man asked, what about my mind? Prabhupada gave him philosophical replies. But the man kept repeating, what about my mind? What about my mind? With a pleading, compassionate look, Prabhupada said, I have no other medicine. Please chant this, Hare Krishna. I have no other explanation. I have no other answer. But the man kept talking about his mind. Finally, one of the women devotees interrupted and said, just do what he says, just try it. And Prabhupada picked up his kartals and began kirtan. One evening, a boy burst into a lecture exclaiming that a riot was gathering on Hyde Street. Swami should come immediately, address the crowd, and calm everyone down. Mukunda explained that it wasn't necessary for Swamiji to go. Others could help. The boy just stared at Prabhupada as if giving an ultimatum. Unless Swamiji came immediately, there would be a riot, and Swamiji would be to blame. Prabhupada spoke as if preparing to do what the boy wanted. Yes, I'm prepared. But nobody went, and there was no riot. In their nasha, they just didn't know what they were doing. Usually during the kirtan, at least one dancer would carry on in a narcissistic, egoistic way, occasionally becoming lewd to the point where Prabhupada would ask the person to stop. One evening before Srila Prabhupada had come down from his apartment, a girl in a miniskirt began writhing and gyrating in a temple during kirtan. When one of the devotees went upstairs and told Prabhupada, he replied, that's all right, let her use her energy for Krishna. I'm coming soon and I'll see for myself. When Prabhupada arrived and started another kirtan, the girl, who was very skinny, again began to wriggle and gyrate. Prabhupada opened his eyes and saw her. He frowned and glanced at some of his disciples, indicating his displeasure. Taking the girl aside, one of the women escorted her out. A few minutes later, the girl returned, wearing slacks and dressed in a more reserved style. Really, only Prabhupada could handle that. Chalo, I guess we can stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisance.
Hare
Prabhuji,
Krishna.
it's so true that actually when we hear all these things and what we do in practical life, then we realize how it is difficult the way Prabhupada was doing it very easily, actually, dealing with people.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. But in India, although we
Yes.
don't meet these kind of hippies, but still meet kind of different kind of people. And
Yes, Prabhuji.
it's not easy to teach to them.
Oh, yes, Prabhuji. In fact, in India, it is always a half full people. Those who know something.
Yeah,
For
they
them,
say, oh, I know everything about Krishna and I know everything.
प्रभु जी एक्चुअली नहीं, मेरे सोसाइटी में मैं बहुत सारी माता जी लोग हैं जो थोड़ी मतलब ओल्ड एज माता जी, पता नहीं, आई हैव समथिंग लाइक कि उनके साथ मेरा बहुत जम जाता है, तो मैं कीर्तन वीर्तन करती थी उनके साथ। तो कुछ लोग तो बहुत सिंपल हैं, जो जैसे बोलो वो करते हैं, बट कुछ लोग जो है ना वो बहुत ऐसे, अरे मैंने तो देखा है, मतलब एक अभी रिसेंटली मुझे एक माता जी मिली, वो बोल रही थी कि मैंने तो देखा है ये जो लोग जितना करते हैं ना उनकी मृत्यु बहुत दर्दनाक होती है, तो मुझे तो डर ही लगता है इन सब चीजों से कि क्यों इस तरह से करना, मतलब क्यों। तो मैंने देखा है मेरे पड़ोस में वो हमेशा मतलब क्या, गौ के जो 5 चीजें होती हैं उस पे जिंदगी बिताती थी वो औरत, इतना व्रत करती थी और फिर भी वो लास्ट में बेड पे रिडन थी। सो ये सब चीज़ें देख करके फिर मन उतर जाता है भक्ति-वक्ति से। तो मुझे लगता है अब इनको अब क्या समझाऊँ, और उससे क्या होता है बाकी लोग भी थोड़े नेगेटिव हो जाते हैं कि अरे हाँ, ये ऐसे बोल रही हैं। मैंने बोला अभी मैंने बोला ऐसे भी तो ये तो बॉडी तो यही रहने वाला है ना। ये बॉल अभी मतलब मुझे लग रहा था कि इनको मैं क्या बोलूँ? बोले कि होने दीजिए ना, वो उनके लिए है, वो उनका वैसा गति था। अभी हमारे लिए क्या है कि हमको ये सीखना है कि भगवान तो उनका कर्म खत्म कर रहे हैं। हमें तो अपना कर्म करना चाहिए, बट मुझे खुद समझ नहीं पा रही थी कि अब पता नहीं ये किस लेवल पे जा चले जाएँगे।
I know it's difficult, but वही हमें अपना काम करना है, बाकी बाकी भगवान जाने।
प्रभु जी, इनफैक्ट अभी तो मुझे थोड़ा-सा डर भी लगता है आफ्टर इनिशिएशन, कि मुझे ऐसा लगता है ये लोग ये ना समझ लें कि अरे! ये तो पता नहीं क्या पोंगा पंडित है। तो यार ना अर्लियर आई वाज़ वेरी बिंदास बोल देती थी कि बोला है ना, मतलब मैं एक्चुअली मैंने रामचरितमानस पढ़ा है प्रभु जी, तो मतलब बहुत तो नहीं, बट जो उसकी जो जिस तरह से समझता है, जो रामचरितमानस पढ़े हैं, जो लोगों को उनका उसका पता है, उसमें से रेफरेंस देके फिर उनको बताने लगती हूँ, सो दैट दे आर अवेयर ऑफ इट एट लीस्ट।
हम्म, ये
बट
वही
देख
है, बस ट्राई करते रहो। और कुछ नहीं। Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. Chalo, you all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Ram.
हरे कृष्णा, थैंक